I'm Rob Lapham. I was there Saturday evening. I conducted an hour session Thursday afternoon at the LSLA event. And this next hour is to look at what is working today in Texas, the system, what we're using. This is mostly from a user perspective to familiarize folks, particularly not familiar with CiviCRM. So I'm just going to show a few introductory slides, and we're going to get right into the live production system. Some housekeeping items. I hope to finish the presentation in 20 minutes to allow most of this hour for questions. So those of you who are on will drive where we go here. The general intent is to have audio on mute if you're dialing in by telephone, if you mute your own phone just during the presentation. But over on the right-hand side of the screen under chat, if you got a question, feel free to bang it in there. If we're in that particular section, I'll address the question in real time. Otherwise, we'll cycle through all of them at the end of the presentation. And as I said earlier, folks are starting July 4 early, so this was probably not the greatest time to schedule it. But it's being recorded, so it's available for folks who want it after the event. And since it is being recorded, this is my contact information. And Peter Petrick, who's also on the line, you saw him either Saturday or both Saturday and last Thursday evening sitting in the back of the room. And to the extent there are technical questions of any kind after the presentation, he's probably the best person to address those. I'm a retired business guy. I understand the IT jargon, but I am by no means a techie. From Texas's perspective, I was just after something that worked, and I don't speak bits and bytes. The history of what we're using right now, we use the term Libertas. It won't stay that way because of changes that we're making, improvements. This system came out of the Saratoga project, started some 3 years ago. It is built on a Joomla front end, CiviCRM back end, with a sprinkling of libertarian features to make it look cool. Substantially the same system was adopted in 2012 by LP Colorado, and last year both Ohio and Texas adopted basically the same system. And this last thing, I said, good. I'd actually say Libertas is a great concept, but neither of the vendors could complete the system build. And as a result of that, Colorado terminated its agreement with Big L Solutions, its vendor, about a month ago. In February, Texas terminated its agreement with Libertas Web Services. I'm not sure exactly what Ohio has done. The president of Libertas Web Services, I understand from Kevin Nedler, got divorced and she's MIA. We don't know where she went. In any case, without the designer of the system to finish the build, we engaged Peter Petrick of Dallas, and he finished what Libertas Web Services was not able to accomplish. And just to describe what was not able to be accomplished, the significant thing, LP Colorado has all their data loaded, all their legacy data, some 25,000 odd records are working. Their Civi back end is working fine, but they cannot integrate it with the front end at this point. And this is after 2 years, still haven't been able to connect front end and back end. By contrast, LP Ohio has its front end and back end connected. So if you make a donation or request information, run for office, any of those things in Ohio, and fill out the front end web form, that transaction is captured in real time in the back end, and that part of it's working. But they can't load their data. LP Texas has both those things running at the same time, and if you take LP Ohio and LP Colorado together, between them, they've got what LP Texas has. This is something that I've been discussing with the chairs of both of those parties. Anyway, on April the 3rd, 3 months ago, everything was working for us as far as the infrastructure build was concerned. So what we're going to do today is I want to go over an example of information flow, how data flows from the front end to the back end. It's really important because it captures all our data and eliminates a whole ton of original keystroke stuff, having to repeat it. And then we're going to go through Civi contacts, both what the whole database looks like, our primary access by counties. We always need to know who our constituents are in a given county. Our county chairs need to know that. And another way to access certain groups of data, certain groups of contacts, is by attribute. And then we'll go into contacts in detail. We'll get into the donations, events, which is very much like Eventbrite, except that it's integrated. Eventbrite's a separate program, and reports. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the next thing coming up this month, which is CiviMail and some future things. So that's what an outline. We may come back to this, but let's get right into the application. What you're looking at now is the dashboard, main dashboard. And I want to go out. I'm not going to stay on the website very long. We're on the website right now, not the back end, the front end. And I've picked one of the forms just to characterize for those of you that haven't seen it. We pick up when somebody says, okay, I think I want to volunteer for LP Texas. We pick up the contact information. They're keying that in. We pick up what they are willing to do. Are you willing to do some block walking? Are you not willing to make phone calls? Whatever it is that they say they're willing to do, we're picking up that information so that we know and have in our database kind of where they fit, their own perception. Even before we talk to them, we know that. And the third piece of information that we're collecting is what are your hot buttons? Are you an end of Fed person? Do you not care about education? Are you really hot on Second Amendment? And you're not required to check any of these things, but basically we are collecting the information to know what their hot buttons are. So we get that information as soon as they hit save, or as soon as they type in the CAPTCHA thing and hit save, we get that information immediately. Going back to the back-end system, I am right here at volunteers. And all of these volunteers, there are 56 of them since we turned on the system. And I notice something that jumps out is, although everybody's Texas, but one of them is not. One of them is Louisiana. Daniel Hayes was at our last Thursday afternoon session, and he decided to be a volunteer in real time. And he did something else that I didn't know about, but the system knows about it. If it's blue, it's selectable. You can obviously, the basic contact information is here, but if you want the whole record, you click the blue thing. And this particular record is the record for Daniel Hayes from Metairie, Louisiana, from New Orleans area. His phone number, his email. And the thing that struck me when I opened the record is he said he was going to volunteer. I invited him to, but immediately I noticed in these attributes across the top, there was a contribution there. And he didn't tell me he did that. I think he just did it to see whether or not it would be discovered. So it's blue. I'm going to click on contributions. And what it shows is that he donated $17.76 on June 26th. That's last Thursday at 3:20 p.m. My system is set to Central Time. It was actually 4:20 Eastern when the session was going on. He didn't tell me. He probably wanted to see if I picked it up. Well, LP Texas is $17.76 better off as the result that he did that. Anyway, he volunteered. He told me he was going to volunteer. So all of the information above this line here is standard out-of-the-box Civi. And no data there, but it's just a standard template. We haven't done anything to it. Where it's populated with data, he filled it in. He said his nickname was Dan. I don't know that. By the way, he ended up as an alternate to the LNC. So, and he's also, I understand, very active in Louisiana, bringing up new counties and so forth. Anyway, we know who he is, Daniel Hayes. We know where he lives, and his phone number and his email. And below the line, because he volunteered, I can go to, there's 11 different customized tables here, if you will. And so I can look at volunteer fields and see what it is that he said about himself that we're picking up. He says he'll register and vote Libertarian. He's not agreeing to a bunch of, he will write letters to the editor and so forth. So we pick that information up and we know before we even talk to him what he thinks he's willing. He's also identified his interests. Well, being the strong Libertarian that knows what he is, he said yes for everything. Okay, that's fine. As I say, contributions was the thing that really surprised me. Okay, going back to where we are, we can come back to this later if you wish, but I've just sort of described information flow in terms of forms that are on our website. As soon as that information is saved by the originator, we have it in the back end and we know immediately. And in fact, I have on several occasions, one of those, what are you willing to do for the party, says, I have IT experience. And I always, as soon as I see that, I call the person, and often I get them before they even left their desk or their phone. because I'm interested in what type of IT experience they have and whether or not it's relevant to what we're doing. So now we're going to take a look at city contacts, all records, a kind of a 30,000-foot view back to the thing. And if I search for contacts, and if I don't put any other limiting factors on it, don't filter it at all, and simply say search, I'm going to get all of the contacts. And in Texas, we were successful in legacy data. Right now, we have 32,940 records in the database, starting with Mr. Ackerland and ending it with ZZ Zelowski, I don't know what. But and as soon as I select any one or bunches of records, or if I select all of them, I can perform actions. For example, I can export the contacts if I wished to an Excel file. I can do a mass mailing to those for whom I have email addresses. I can perform a bunch of actions, and we'll get to some specifics on that when we look at an individual record. So those are all the contacts. If I want to perform a frequent search that we do, it's by county. I think we're all the basic building block as a county. If I key in or type in any county, there's 254 of them in Texas. And if I say, give me for Travis County, if I can spell right. Travis is the county in which our capital city of Austin exists. And as soon as I click search, I guess I did click search, of the 32,000 records, 3,275 of them are in Austin area, Travis County. Our smallest county in Texas is on the New Mexico border. It's called Loving County, and Loving County is about half the size of Rhode Island, but nobody lives there. Actually, I take that back. The U.S. Census Bureau says 82 people live there. And of the 82 people, we have 2 people who live in there. It's a sort of a county seat, but nothing is incorporated in Loving County. Anyways, 2 people here. And when our executive director gets around to it, I'm sure she'll call them and see who might like to be a county chair. Yeah. Anyway, that's at the county level. A different way to access, there's several different ways to access data, is by attribute. If I say, give me all the folks that contributed to this system, that made the directed purpose donations that paid for the contract that we signed in July of last year, I get them all. There's 19 of them. And of course, I have all their information. And what I want to do is I want to go back into a contact record. And there's some confidential information in some of this. So let me choose my own record because I don't care. There is no confidential information in my record. And you'll see the same kind of pattern that we saw for Dan of Louisiana. My email address, I have a home email address, I have a website, where I live, my billing address, my phone number, all that usual stuff. And now you'll see quite a few more transactions. Before I get to these attributes across this bar, I want to point out what I should have pointed out before. This white on black at the top is the navigation bar for CiviCRM. Home, search, CiviContact, CiviContribute, CiviEvent, CiviMail, CiviMember, CiviCampaign, CiviReport, and administration. We'll actually go into admin there as well, and help. So that's a different navigation bar than the one you see, the black on gray, I guess it is, which happens to be the administration navigation bar for Joomla, the front end. But we're in the back end, only CiviCRM. I'm not going to go into the front end during this session unless there is a specific question for it. So where was I? Oh, yeah. We were in Daniel Hayes before, but now I want to go into this particular contact record. I will refer to the person in the third person, easier to handle that way. This person apparently has made 23 contributions. Mr. Hayes made 1 last Thursday. These contributions go back to the first day we turned on CiviContribute, which is November the 4th, last year at 7:06 in the morning. This guy made a big contribution to see if it worked, and my gosh, it did. It flowed right through and through authorize.net to our merchant processor and hit the bank account 2 days later through the automated clearinghouse. Every single donation that this person made from the start is recorded here. There is a mix of where it says recurring contributions. These are online monthly things. I'm just testing. You can't make a donation of less than $10, so you see a lot of $10.02 and that type of thing. And here, on February the 17th, I registered for our state convention. That's why the big dollars there having to do with, you know, all the dinners or whatever. And right up through June the 12th, when I was testing some new thing, phone, pending, pay later, that transaction hasn't gone through. I have to figure out what's going on there. But I know for this person everything that he has donated from the start, and that's really helpful. Our executive director, you know, the phone rings, and she doesn't personally know the person on the other end, which is more likely the case than not. She's immediately going to pull up that person's record and have at her fingertips at one place everything that the system knows about that person. So we know about this person's contributions. We know about this person's activities, which are, they're all a contribution to some other things. For example, sample Civic Mail newsletter. Oh, I'll go ahead and show that in a minute. A couple of tests. I canceled a recurring contribution for myself. I canceled a recurring contribution for Mr. Tobin Long on June the 5th at 6:28 p.m. because the executive director called me up and said, Rob, can you cancel that donation? She hasn't become familiar yet with handling it herself. She will, by the end of this month, be doing it herself faster than she can call me. In any case, in addition to my contributions, anything else that I did or that has affected that particular record is recorded in activities. Events, those are the events I previously spoke about, the state convention. Groups, I belong to every group there is. Every group that we have created so far. I just want to see how it works, so I sign up for all the groups. Notes, I can't remember what the notes are. Tests, okay. Over here, change log 80. There have been 80 different changes to this record since November the 4th, and that's because every time I make a configuration change, I test it out on my own record. So a lot of things going on my record, because I just want to see what the end result is. I don't know how the software is. I don't understand the coding, but I do need to understand whether I'm getting what I need out of it. By the way, I want to go back to Mr. Daniel Hayes of Louisiana that we were looking at a minute ago, because I forgot to tell you one thing about what he did. He contributed, you remember, $17.76. Our state Texas Ethics Commission, probably like the election commission in your state, requires donations over a certain amount. We are supposed to collect the employer and the occupation. So again, one of these tables is the shortest one it is. We can see that Mr. Hayes is a massage therapist, and he works for himself at Spa Atlantis. There's no smarts in the software. If they go ahead and put garbage in there, it's garbage out. But our Texas Ethics Commission requires us to use best efforts. So we collect all that information. Going back to my record, again, like Mr. Hayes, we have these customized templates. Volunteer field, what have I volunteered for? What are my hot button interests? Basic voter info, I'm going to skip a couple of these because they're not populated yet. I'll get into them if we have questions. In basic voter info, in the same as Mr. Hayes, I live in Fort Bend County, and although this is not populated with state voter information, the county is always going to be there. We picked that up on the front end. I have no idea what county Mr. Hayes is in, but we have got to know that. And that's not part of Civi, nonprofit, but by gosh, it's part of ours. Okay, he lives in Jefferson County, Jefferson Parish, I think they call it in Louisiana. But we need to know that, and we also have to. We need that in order to be able to pull our records by county, because our county chairs demand that. Anyway, let's take. I mentioned earlier in the overview that we can perform any number. We can perform a certain number of actions on any group or all of our 30-odd thousand records, or we can do it individually. If I click Actions here, we can see I can send this person an email, I can schedule a meeting or a phone call, I can manually add a contribution, I can manually register the person for an event, I can do a series of things. Let's send the guy an email. And I'm really getting into City Mail here, and this particular module will not be live until later this month. We want to go through a number of tests to make sure that when we start doing our own e-blasts, we don't want to get blacklisted. Right now, we happen to use Constant Contact. Other folks, National uses iContact. MailChimp's another one. There's a dozen of them. The default sender is my email address. If I want, I can, because it's in the system, I can use my home email address. I'm an administrator. I can send an email from no reply at Texas if I wanted to. But anyway, you select it, and then who it's going to. And then I'm going to use a template in the interest of time, and I only have one template here. You will be familiar conceptually with this WYSIWYG stuff here. It's common to all these mass mailers. And so we can do pretty much anything I'm not familiar with anything besides a constant contact. So if MailChimp or something else has a different feature set, I'm not familiar with it. But my understanding or my belief is that we can do pretty much anything in ours that these others do there. So I'll give them some big letters and make it bold, and now it's red. But you get the idea. So I can create a newsletter, send it to myself, send it to any number of people, whatever the group is, and that is that's a key component of CiviMail. I'm jumping around here, but a new mailing. I can. This is where I would create a mail a message template. SMS is in here. I haven't tried it yet. We have to look at this stuff, but that's just an example of an action. I'm not going to send myself this email. I've done that before and got enough emails coming in as they are. That's an example of an action that you can take with respect to any record. I can change, because I have permissions, any of the data here on the screen, or if the data is it's part of a table. I mentioned earlier I live in Fort Bend County. I can't change that on the screen. I can try it. It's not going to work. But I have to, in that case, I go to edit. And when I'm in the edit function, excuse me, got a frog in my throat, I have a number of incremental capabilities. Where are we? If I wanted to change wherever it is, voter data. There, no, there it is. There's the, okay. So here, no, wrong one. Basic voter info. So I do have the ability, if someone was put the wrong county in, we say county, not country, but some people will still go ahead and put USA in there, and we'll go in there and manually change it so that it is correctly recorded. And something Peter suggested to me a couple of days ago, let's do a drop-down menu for our 254 counties so that they cannot put in USA, something like that. Anyway, that's just an example of going into edit to accomplish the desired objective. I will say this, not being an IT person, this seems reasonably intuitive to me, in my experience. Okay, CiviContribute, let's see, contacts, we've done a bit in contacts, CiviContribute. We have looked at Mr. Hayes' contribution, and we've looked at, taken a glance at my contributions. We can find all our contributions by find, and again, if I don't filter it, I'll find all the contributions most recent. First, I can see what's been happening today in the system by find contributions. And again, if I don't put any limiting factors on it and just click search, I'll get them all, going back to the beginning. And so I can see that today, July the 3rd, 105 bucks has come in. $25 from James and $40 from Donald and $40 from George. And I can see that this is a regular automated monthly contribution that comes in every month. Came in at 4:15. They usually come in early morning. I'm not sure that authorized.net does that. And I can see that these other two happen to be a new promotion that we've got. The polo shirts that the Texas delegation had on last Saturday, I guess they ordered a bunch of extra ones, and our web mistress has gone ahead and cranked out a new donations page and a promotion to go ahead and sell those things. Anyway, in contributions, we can import contributions and so forth. And I won't get into price sets unless it comes up in a question. But I will go to manage contribution pages because it drives all of our donations, okay? Generation Liberty, this thing which is in gray right now, we've turned it off because our state conference is over. Donate to the QWERTY County LP monthly. We have the capability, and we expect when we make the appropriate part of this database available to authorized counties, we will have the capability of collecting donations for them and sticking it right in their bank account. Bitcoin is gray because it's not live yet within the system. It's not integrated within Civi. We do Bitcoin donations, but it's handled externally the same way as National does. Adopt a candidate. It's a promotion. $250. You can support the candidate of your choice. Here's the polo shirt. We can do it poster today. I'm not familiar with that one. It must have been just come up in the last week. But our workhorses are LP Texas monthly donation and LP Texas one-time donation. And I can go into how they are constructed if it's of interest. I just want to mention that they're there. Events, same type of thing. I can create a new event. I can manage existing events. As far as I know, the state convention is the only one. We collected all the registrations. Oh, we have an executive committee meeting on May. That's the last one. Okay, so the next one happens to be later this month. But there was an event set up for that. New price sets. I'll leave that. CiviMail. I did show you just an example of CiviMail. It is not working. Excuse me. It's up, but we are not using it yet. Let me go back because we're into the area of things that are not working yet, and I want to be clear that CiviMail, although it'll be up later this month, we're not actually using it yet. CiviMember, we have to redefine or go over what our business definitions of what a member is. You know, a member is a member, is a donor a member, is it a member but not a donor, or a donor without a member? Texas election code says that you do not have to pay anything if you are credentialed as a delegate to the state convention, so they're a member in that sense. We have to sort some of that out. When it's sorted out, then we'll bring up CiviMember. And CiviCampaign, although you'll see it when I go back to the to CiviCRM, I don't know very much about CiviCampaign. I am going to talk a bit about it. For those states that have voter affiliation options when they register to vote, I can see that those states have potentially a great database. Who are all the people who think they are libertarians? Who are all the people who say they are independents? Unfortunately, in Texas, we have 14 million registered voters. We know virtually nothing about them because the state does not collect that. And so I've been less interested in CiviCampaign. Now it's here, and there's a thing there that says go to voter tracking. But when I just looked at it last week, there's nothing there. We haven't set anything up yet. I can find out about Get Out the Vote by going to documentation. This is a kind of new tool. It takes me out of my system into CiviCRM, and it knows that I am in CiviCRM Rev 4.4, and I can, in plain English, in the user guide, find out pretty much anything. And this is a real help. It was a real help to me in studying whether the particular functions met our needs. So if I click on what is CiviCampaign, it describes it, and it tells you how to set it up and so forth. So it says track who has voted using Get Out the Vote. Again, I don't know how Get Out the Vote is used in those states that are very strongly, and you can go through this to identify pretty much anything. Since I'm here at CiviCampaign, I'm going right down to, it's not on my agenda, website integration, choosing your CMS. This is just an FYI. There are 3 front ends that work with Civi. Drupal works best. Drupal and Civi, they mate better than anything. Joomla and WordPress also work, but not quite so well in several aspects. But again, all of the information about choosing your CMS from the perspective of CiviCRM is listed in plain English, and you can download a book if you want to take it home. Anyway, I'm going back to the system again. Got sidetracked there, but I didn't want to. If this comes up in questions, anyone who has some information on CiviCampaign or knows what it is needed, I certainly intend to find out what it is that GoTV represents. What kinds of information? How does the best software that's out there now, how's it working? I want to kind of understand what the level of effort is in cranking out something similar, because everything here is integrated with the basic contact record, and I don't, if we are using in Texas a Get Out the Vote activity, I'm not sure how we would, but if we do, I want to integrate it so that, again, all of the information is in front of our executive director or staff in one thing. Civi reports, I'm not going to get into it. It's common to basically any kind of database. Here's a whole bunch of templates, reports, and of course you can customize, crank a new report based on a template and so forth. But anything in the system will report out. Admin, I'm a sysadmin on the system. There are any number of things that you may ask about that I can show you if that's if it's desirable. Oh, here's one. Enable CiviCRM components. We brought campaigns up from the back last week, but in CiviCRM components, there are a couple of other things that we haven't decided. Where the heck is it? System settings. We are not using and have not brought to this navigation bar Civi Grant. I don't think we'll be applying for grants of nonprofits. Civi Pledge, probably we will. Right now we're just taking donations, but there's a Civi Pledge component. Civi Case, internal tracking tickets. I don't know if we'll use that or not. But anyway, there's a few other things that we can enable and just drop up on the navigation screen if we want. Okay, I have gone through and taken more than 20 minutes. I'm going to shut up. I didn't see, aside from Mr. Petrick's note here, but a private note saying you're at 30 minutes. I didn't see any questions from the audience. So I wonder if we might turn off the mute. And are there questions on things that I've rushed over that you like for them, as long as they don't talk over one another? But I like to respond to questions as a user that I can, so you get a better feel for what we're doing here.
I've got a question.
Sure, and who's speaking?
This is Rich from New Hampshire.
Yes, okay.
We use CiviCRM as our backend as well. We've had a definite problem with spam contact entries. Have you had that problem, and if so, have you figured out a way to effectively scan the database to remove any kind of spam or bogus entries?
I have seen some, and I will say that I don't know what utilities may be in place to see if I'm getting less than I would otherwise. I got a tirade from Israel last week. I'm unnotified for all these, anything that comes in, it pops up on my Outlook. I just want to see what's going on in real time, even if I'm not on the system. So this guy goes on for, hell, I don't know, probably 2,500 characters on his particular issue. And so I put on our list, we're going to go ahead and limit the free-form notes comment box. This is on our request for information form to 500 characters or something like that. We just don't need to listen to that. But I'm trying to think, Rich, if I have seen, I can recall 2 instances since transactions went live last November 4th. So what are we talking about? 8 months, I guess. I can recall 2 where the name, address, it was just gobbledygook. And I went ahead and deleted it. So I guess you can go ahead and do that. I guess it's a technical question. Peter, would you have a comment on spam coming into Civi and what activities normally address that?
Yeah, there's a combination of tools, and it just depends on the sources and scope of what's coming in. Sometimes you just get even humans bypassing capture and things of that nature. So, if it's somebody typing it in mass, you just can't bypass that too much. But there are other ways between CAPTCHA, Malum, if you're using Drupal. There's a honeypot module that inserts invisible fields onto the form that robots will fill out, but humans won't actually see and fill out. So there are different ways of preventing that.
Yeah, that technique works really well. I've used it for other sites. But what if you already have thousands of spam records in your database? Is there? And I didn't see anything in the Civi management to say, as a way to sort of flag stuff or a reliable way to search.
You'd have to. I mean, it's a front CiviCRM, just like any other CRM system. It's a front end to a database. So you would have to say, okay, we've got a particular field where we've got the string of characters, or somehow you would have to identify how to locate those particular records that are spam records, and then you can tag them and delete them, or at least sequester them, or something to that effect.
Okay.
I see that, let's see, who was it? Mark Noble is asking, do we demonstrate how data is important in Civi? Okay, that function is working in Ohio right now, as far as I know, at least the structure of it. So I'm requesting more information on the front end here, and let's see, county, not country. I'm just filling in the required.
Rob, I think what Mark's looking for is actually an example of how to do a mass load. To actually import data into the data.
I'm sorry, are we talking about mass import of data?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, you can't do it. Excuse me. Libertas Web Services couldn't do it for us, and the optimum forecast was 6 weeks from the signing of contract. 6 months later, they still hadn't done it. This is not a function of, I mentioned earlier that Civi works with has been designed to work with 3 CMSs, Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress. It works real slick with Drupal, not so well with Joomla. I would let Peter address the question. He did it for us. We had almost 30,000 records, and that is the single thing that I think prevents LP Ohio from really taking advantage of what you've got. Peter did it for us. I don't know how much I should get into it because I don't have the technical details, but Peter, would you like to address how data is imported when the front end is Joomla?
Sure, and I guess the first part to the answer is it's not just Peter. It's there is a lot of expertise that goes into data management, and our whole team kind of partakes in that. And there are multiple ways to import data. Now, if you were talking thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of records, which we've done on numerous occasions, it depends, what you're trying to do. But there are tools within CiviCRM that allow you to, well, let's just say, import small batches or add to your existing data sets. And again, it's not a limitation necessarily of CiviCRM. It's going to be a limitation of your web host, of PHP timeouts, of just different other technology restrictions that are going to limit you from, taking 50,000 records and dumping them in, at least through what I would call the backend tools of CiviCRM offers. Now, there are other tools which you can do it via MySQL direct loads. You can do it via Drupal batch API code. You can do it from the command line via PHP programmatically. So all of those require a certain sense of programmatic expertise. But the good part about CiviCRM is that once you do have at least some records in the database, let's say you've got a secondary system somewhere or some spreadsheet that's been discovered and you want to bring that in, if you've got a couple 500 records, you can definitely do that through the CiviCRM import interface. The other alternative to that is
Mark,
it doesn't have to be.
Question, or
The other part about the Civi import, it doesn't have to be new records. It could be, you could actually be adding data to existing records. So let's say a lot of the fields that Rob was showing on the forms, if you had a different spreadsheet or an old database where you already have that captured, you could actually add that to your existing context as well.
Yeah, I mean, the process that I was looking for is here in actually Franklin County. We have very detailed data that's more detailed than the Secretary of State data. I think the state is going after. It goes back 10 years with how people voted. And I'd like to, that data is updated every day at 3 o'clock as a flat file that needs to be downloaded. And so I can write stuff. Right now I'm doing SSIS packages to take it into Microsoft SQL, and from there I could, script stuff to take it to MySQL or whatever. I was just wondering if there is an interface, or we could even use an API or of some kind.
Yeah, there is a API, and that's kind of where Rob was saying that the Drupal front end works better than WordPress or Joomla, simply because there is different ways to hook into CiviCRM. And if you've got every day at 3 p.m. a flat file, and you can put it out into, if it's like a CSV or something like that, you could set up an import if you wanted to do it manually, you could do an import, have a mapping available for the fields that you're bringing in, and map those to the custom fields where you're storing the data, and just take it from there. So there is nothing preventing you from doing that.
Okay, yeah, it's about 150 megs a day.
It's really more of a function of how many records you have in your database and how many custom fields you're talking about, because again, It's not.
Yeah, it's not a Delta file. It's like it's every voter every day. So
Yeah.
it's kind of I'd want to probably process it down a little bit, and then we just have a Delta file.
Sure.
Carlton is asking the question here, what are the purposes of groups? And on the screen this is just fine context. There are some groups here. To be honest with you, stuff that we've been using so far is a simpler thing, which is tags. Groups is more sophisticated than tags, and smart groups is more sophisticated than groups. But frankly, I haven't, aside from existing groups that were set up by the original designer, I haven't given thought to how we are going to be defining other groups. Would you have a comment on that, Peter, as far as distinguishing between groups and tags? And Carlton, if that's not answering your question, please say so.
Yeah, the groups and tags are very similar, and it really comes down to usability and such. Groups are more advanced because they can be used for example, for mailings. But in other instances, the tags are easier to just check off on and off, whereas adding somebody to a group or removing them actually creates an activity record, so you can tell when they were added to the group and by whom, and when they were taken out. Tag is more like it's almost like an on-off button, if you will. So that's one of the differences between groups and tags.
And Carlton, I see that Rich answered the question. I was too busy talking. So call New Hampshire, Carlton, because they're using groups and I haven't got to them yet. Let's see, what else?
The other part of that was, and Peter did answer, that groups can be used for security, and that was part of the other part of it I was kind of interested about, is that we can use that for filtering access to certain data, so either to be only read-only or read-write to certain data.
Groups are inherently relevant in regards to ACL. So if you're trying to separate things out in some way, shape, or form, the groups are definitely the way to go. The other thing is, again, if you're using Drupal on the front end, there are a number of tools that you can synchronize groups with, either organic groups on the Drupal side, or you can synchronize the groups with roles and permissions on the Drupal side, etc. So as soon as somebody comes in, you can have a group set up for people that have donated, let's say, over $1,000, and that may create that associates that record, so that when somebody comes in and logs into your website, maybe you have some special area for high-end donors or something of that effect. So it allows you to coordinate that, or you might have donors versus members, or members versus volunteers. You put those in a group. When the volunteer logs in, their role identifies and says, oh, okay, I can see different parts of this password-protected section that's designated for volunteers, and members likewise.
This is Rob, and I have a question for Rich. Rich, what's New Hampshire using for its front end? If you have Civi as a back end, is it linked to a front end?
We use Drupal.
Oh, okay. That's you're ahead of us. I wish I had used Drupal, but I didn't understand that when we were speccing the system out. That's cool. I recall at the Saturday meeting, just looking at hands that went up when the topic of Civi came up, about 8 people raised their hands. I don't know how many states that means, but I imagine the information will be available fairly soon as to who's using what. So Drupal Civi is, in my opinion, even though we're using Joomla, Drupal Civi is the right combination. Other kinds of questions? We've got 15 minutes left.
Yeah, I got one if no one has anything else pressing. This is Bob Fry in Ohio as well. Just curious about with the data sets, what kind of front end can you build on the website for that, like either through, I guess, Joomla or Drupal, or is it pretty much only accessible through the administration console here?
Not sure I understand the question. Peter, did you understand the question? Because sometimes I'm a little dense here.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're going with it, but if you have do you have an example that you were thinking about?
Yeah, I know one of our Ohio guys, he kind of built this little, and I don't know how he interfaced it, but he built a little database that you could just, it's a website, you could like download it to your tablet and, do a walking list kind of thing. And instead of having to come into the administration console, I'm thinking of like a special area where you can build these get out the vote tools and stuff without having somebody actually sign, log in into Joomla, give them a login, and give them try to limit their access to different contacts instead of just kind of like doing a query basically on the CRM database.
Yeah. Again, CiviCRM, it's a front end to a database, and then not as familiar with the Joomla part, but on Drupal, you can actually, if you're familiar with Drupal, there is a module called Views, which is extensively used, and it's basically a GUI tool to build your own queries. So you can we've built numerous views that, and those particular views can interface with the CiviCRM tables. So you could build a list of, I want everybody in a particular zip code or zip +4. I want to see, you can map things out. I mean, you can really do a lot of other data. And I think that's kind of even the next step after the conversion from Joomla to Drupal for LP Texas, where they're not just looking at the front end going data into the back end, but then bringing the data from the back end, from the CiviCRM side of things, and making it more available on the Drupal side.
Yeah, because I see that as pretty much the ultimate goal of all this database, being able to get it out and use it in certain situations like that. So
yeah,
okay.
we've done that for a number of organizations already. It's just that where we're starting here, we're starting with number one, we're starting with Joomla, and number two, we started with effectively no records in the database or very few. So the priorities were really set around getting the records into the CiviCRM database, historical records, so that people can start working with them. And then next is upgrading the infrastructure and making the Drupal front end available to it as opposed to Joomla.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I find myself wanting to ask Rich again in New Hampshire, because you do have Drupal. Do you use, did you have a comment on Bob's question, or is that not operative right now? You're not doing that right now in Drupal?
We're not doing anything nearly that sophisticated. We do have everything integrated. We use the events and the donates, pretty much everything you showed us here. And we do have some minor features of if a user is logged in, we can do some personalization. And like if they're logged in, like it automatically fills in all their contact information when they're on a forum, so they don't have to retype it. So there's some nice little personalization features that are there, but we haven't done anything. We have some views for candidates, and that's probably the main thing we have a view for. My webmaster handles all that because I personally really find Drupal kind of frustrating to use from a developer point of view. But I know that there's a lot of functionality there, and since it's a core module, there is a lot of integration opportunities there. If you're willing to sort of dive in and look through the APIs and all the different modules that are available.
Yeah, I do. I think we all recognize it's a trade-off. There is the more functionality with Drupal. I was talking to one individual last week, Andy. I forget his last name, but he's the executive director in Minnesota, and he says they moved from Drupal to WordPress as a front end, and he said they regret that they did it. And I use WordPress for my own campaign site. It's easy to use, and I think that's why so many people use it. But if it's not going to provide the incremental functionality that you want with the back end, I guess you can't. It's not ideal to consider the front end in and of itself and really have to look at the whole thing. I'd like to move to New Hampshire to get Drupal and Civi both together. I think that's the cat's whiskers. But I agree, the little I've looked at Drupal, it is not quite as intuitive as it seemed to me that Joomla is. So, trade-offs. Anyway, talking too much. Anybody else got some questions here?
It's not so much a question, but this is Carlton from Ohio. It's more the question of the comparison between the three different CMSs. I know that when Bob Conroy was the one that actually got the Joomla and Civi combination in Ohio, that a lot of stuff came from. It was that reason, because Drupal would really require a lot of PHP to really utilize it, but Joomla was easy to kind of just get up and run with it. But WordPress wasn't an option at that time, so I'm kind of curious, now that WordPress has been around for, I think, 2 or 3 years, what's it lacking at that point there? I'm sure it's not something we can discuss here, but I'd like to see a kind of comparison of those three CMSs.
I mean, I'll give you.
You know, there's some basic information on the Civi list, each of them. I don't know how much detail it goes into. As I say, I love WordPress, which I use separately, but I wouldn't connect it. Well, anyway, it seems to me that both the Civi and the Drupal development communities are, it's too much of it's an overstatement to say they're in love with one another, but there seems to be a lot of work going on in parallel. They seem to be working in tracks. I read this mostly through Civi News and don't get to read the Drupal stuff very much, but I do think there's even incremental functionality in Drupal 8 when that comes out, in recognizing that some people, some Drupal developers are recognizing Civi to be some kind of standard. I don't know if that's broadly held, but anyway, I too wish we had started with Drupal. But you know, and I have asked, this goes back 2 years when I originally asked Brett Pajunas, from whom I first understood what Saratoga was all about. And the question was never answered. Why are you using Joomla as a front end? Because we had expertise within Texas who were Drupal people. And I would just assume, you know, obviously tap into those volunteers. He never did answer the question. Jillian Mack never did answer the question. We weren't driving it. You know, Colorado and Ohio had already bought in to one sort of. And I don't know why Joomla was, if Joomla was selected based on a rational, you know, review of the alternatives. It may have been that the system architect that was used by both of those companies, Ben Smelly, maybe he was just a Joomla guy, knew what it was, but obviously he did not understand, or somebody did not understand, the challenges that Joomla apparently presents when the objective is to import large amounts of data. Doesn't work, or it doesn't work very well, except however Peter manages to get it done.
Well, and part of it is that really over the last 3 years, the Joomla development has stalled to a great extent. So, you know, if you would have asked the question of compare WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal 3 years ago, it would have been a very different answer than it is today. Frankly, at the individual county level and even maybe some state levels, you know, the WordPress deployment is probably okay. And I'm going to make some very general and broad statements here, but roughly said, you know, WordPress is great at what it does as long as it does 95% of what you want it to do. There's plugins and you can do things a little bit extra, but that's about kind of where it is. If you're really looking for more of an enterprise system where you don't want to just feed the data from one end to the other and then maybe use a little bit of CiviCRM on the back end or something like that, then you really have to start looking at, okay, what other functionalities how can I extend it? And when you get into that enterprise level thinking, at least, of what you'd like to see, you don't have to use all the different pieces of Drupal and all the different complexities of it, but you should at least have the option to do it. And one of the good examples, for example, is in WordPress, the permissions for CiviCRM didn't arrive until just very recently when there were some finally advances made in the permissioning system with WordPress. And I go back in this community for a while, and I can tell you, you know, WordPress was started as a blogging platform for individuals, and it's kind of grown into, with permissions, with content management, into more of a web management, content management system. Drupal, on the other hand, started as a content management system that happens to do blogging, amongst many, many, many other things. And I think that design difference is at the core of that issue. And having been involved with CiviCRM, presented at their conferences, et cetera, I can tell you that, yes, there are a number of deployments of CiviCRM on WordPress. There are some on Joomla as well. But there are no statistics out there, but my guess would be somewhere between 2/3 and 80% of CiviCRM deployments are on Drupal.
Wow. Anybody who wants to jump in with questions, I think the most interesting thing this week was the email that Sam Goldstein kicked out about the LNC reauthorizing the IT committee, of which he and Rich
Mm-hmm.
Tomaso, the LNC members, and I think it's refreshing that that's been reconstituted, because it's sort of kind of been dormant, I think, the last couple of years, ever since the initial Saratoga Libertas thing came up. I haven't seen a lot of activity with respect to IT. And what National is, using right now is what, 6, maybe it's even 8 years old. I'm not saying it's that old is no good, but I don't think IT has been looked at seriously in a fair amount of time. So I'm glad to see the new emphasis wherever that committee goes.
Yeah, there's definitely that was a big takeaway from the convention, both from because I know a lot of states are moving forward with things like Civi. There was a huge discussion, mostly on the sidelines, about better voting stuff at the convention. But given what we want to do for 2016 especially, we definitely need to kick the national IT infrastructure into gear. So an official announcement's going out very shortly, but there's a few places on Facebook and stuff. If anyone here is interested in being on the IT committee, you can send an email to Sam and I. I'll post something to the state chairs list tonight, so people can pass it on to their internal teams. We're looking to get that committee populated before month's end, so we can really start looking at the big picture and driving, at least from the national office, some solutions. And so we're ready. It's probably going to be more of a 2016 kind of time frame, although there's going to be some stuff we hope we can get done this year. But yeah, this is definitely something we absolutely need. We're not gonna, we're not gonna keep growing the way we want to without some good back-end systems and integrating that with our front end as well.
And to that point, National is already using Drupal. And, one of the, CiviCRM seems to have, again, it's an open source project that's been used for nonprofits, for political activism, et cetera. So it does do a lot of what, at least in my discussions, a lot of the states would like to see it do. And it's, frankly, it's quite prevalent. I would say probably short of Excel spreadsheets. It's the most often quoted system amongst the different states. And I think where the IT committee and just the leadership from the states can come in is to say, hey, for example, National is collecting volunteers and people that would like to run for an office into a form. And instead of laboriously putting it into spreadsheets and sending out these things 5 weeks after somebody submitted it, maybe there needs to be a API that can interface with the states, and the states' databases can grab that data in a much more timely fashion and without having to rekey it and copy paste it, whether it's out of a spreadsheet or an email, or have to build some parsing systems to get either the spreadsheets or the emails into their own system. Maybe there could be, if 10 or 12 or 15 states are using CiviCRM, setting up some kind of a call to the national database and say, hey, I'd like my state's updated data at the week's end. That should be a pretty straightforward solution.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing we're going to be looking at, data integration and handoffs, and minimizing human key punching and all this stuff to streamline operations. Actually, I have a question for you. Are you familiar with Razor's Edge?
Yes, we've done a number of migrations off of it.
Yeah, is there an API that will integrate Civi with Razor's Edge, or even web forms with Razor's Edge?
Not that I know off the top of my head. I know we've integrated some web forms into Razor's Edge.
Okay.
But part of Razor's Edge's challenge is that their API has not really been backward compatible. So every time they go through a cycle of an upgrade, you're running a pretty big chance that your stuff might not work, and you don't really get a chance or have a say in whether you want an upgraded system or not. So that's been a tremendous burden on the clients that we have dealt with. They said, it's just once we actually start integrating with it, it's not backward compatible. We don't have a say in the upgrade process, and it just blows our budget out of the water when we suddenly have to jump and reintegrate something with the Razor's Edge API.
All right. Well, We can talk offline, but any sort of any insight you have on that would be very helpful. I don't think the Nationals office is going to go away from Razor's Edge anytime soon.
Sure.
So yeah, if you could send me whatever notes or if there's any white papers or code out there that we could pass along to the IT team, I think that would save it. That would be really useful, at least in the near term.
Yeah, I can take a look through our implementation notes and provide what we have. And the other thing is, even if National doesn't move away from Razor's Edge, again, they are already using Drupal and they are collecting this data electronically. So it doesn't have to go from Drupal to CiviCRM at the national level before it gets handed off to the states. It can go from Drupal because it's already stored within the Drupal database electronically. Drupal can hand it off into CiviCRM to the individual state. So that option is still there, and National can still fork it off of that database to Razor's Edge for their own purposes. So,
Okay, that's a cool idea. Yeah.
all we're saying is instead of going from National Drupal to National Razor's Edge to a spreadsheet that then gets distributed to the states, what we're saying is take it from Drupal, fork it at that point between the states and Razor's Edge, and then everybody can do with it as they wish.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes that's a good idea.
Guys, we're at time. It sounds like Peter and Rich are going to have some other conversations separately. Thanks very much for connecting. You've got our contact information up on the screen. I'm excited. Things are about ready to move. Thank you very much, and you all have a great evening.